Okay, I'm going to go over the unit, or not the unit, but the midterm review. So first question is, what's the equation for the inverse of the following function? So our goal is to switch x and y and solve for y. So I'm going to change this to y. That's what f of x really is. But what we're really going to do is switch the variables now. So this y becomes an x, and this x becomes a y. Don't change any of the variables. And then to get the y by itself, we have to add 3. And so we have x plus 3 equals 2y. And last step is to divide by 2. Now, when you cancel this, we have y by itself, but we're going to use the notation for inverse with this f with the little minus 1 of x, which is x plus 3 over 2. Okay. The next one's another inverse problem. Again, this is really our y. So we're going to switch x and y, so change this to y. 1/3, make that x into a y plus 2. And now you can do one of two things. You can go ahead and fraction bust if you want to. That means get rid of this fraction. So I'm going to get rid of the 1/3 by multiplying by the LCD, which is 3. So multiply everything by 3. This cancels. Here we'll have a 3x equals y, because this cancels, and then 3 times 2 is 6. And then one last step to get that y by itself, and that's to subtract the 6. So we have 3x minus 6 is equal to y, but I'm going to use the notation for the inverse, which is f with the little minus 1 of x, and that equals 3x minus 6. Okay, this next one's asking for intervals of increase, decrease, and constant. Increase from left to right. So increasing is going up here, and you use the x value, so follow this up. It's -1, and follow this down to 4. So that's your increasing interval. It's from -1 to 4, and I'm writing this in an interval notation. The next part is this, which is considered a constant because it doesn't go up or down. So we already have the value for 4, but we have to move this down here and find out what that x value is, 7. So this would be considered your constant, and that's from 4 to 7. All right, and then the last part, this is going down, so that's considered a decrease. And again, we already have the 7, but follow this down, we have a 9. So from 7 to 9. Okay. All right, these ones, remember, roots grow on bottom, and the root is on the outside, so this would be k to the 3 over 7 power, whereas this one will be 11 over 8. Okay, powers go on the bottom. Roots go on the bottom. All right, on this one right here, we're going to simplify. That means you're going to multiply this out. So distribute the x. You're multiplying x by all 3, and then we'll multiply the 2 by all 3. So x times 3x squared is 3x to the 3rd. X times -4x is -4x squared. X times 5 is 5x. And now we're going to multiply the 2 to this. 2 times x to x squared is, 2 times 3x squared is 6x squared. 2 times -4x is a -8x, and 2 times 5 is 10. And then all I'm going to do is really just add this up together here. So we have a 3x cubed. My like terms are these x squareds, which gets me a 2x squared. Adding these together gets me a -3x, and you have the plus 10. The next one we're going to do is multiply this out. So again, it's just like the top one, but it's a little easier. So we're going to multiply 3 times 3x, which is a 9x squared. 3x times -4 is -12x. 4 times 3x is a positive 12x. 4 times -4 is -16. If you look at your middle terms here, -12x and positive 12x, that cancels. So we get a 9x squared minus 16. Okay, when you square something, that means the same thing twice. 2r plus 4s times 2r plus 4s. And we're going to distribute this. So 2r times 2r is 4r squared. 2r times 4s, 2 times 4 is 8, and then you have an r and an s. Write it alphabetically. 4s times 2r is 4 times 2, which is 8, and then you have an s and an r, but write it alphabetically, so it's rs. 4s times 4s is 16s squared. These are like terms together. They both have the same exact variable, so we're going to add that together. So that adds up to 16rs. This one. And then this next one is the same thing twice again. So we have 3x 3x minus 2 times another 3x minus 2. Again, we're going to distribute. 3x times 3x is 9x squared. 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x. Negative 2 times 3x is another negative 6x. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. Again, these are like terms. They are not opposite signs, so negative 6x plus negative 6x is a negative 12x. All right, and then this one is asking for the expression for this perimeter. So it's 2 times the length times 2 times the width. So we have 2 times, this is the length, 3x squared plus 2 times this width, 2x squared plus 1. And we're going to simplify by distributing. So distribute, we get 6x squared, 2 times 2, that's 4. And then those parentheses go away. 2 times 2x squared is a 4x squared. And then 2 times 1 is a 2. Right, our like terms, we have a 6x squared that goes with 4x squared. That gets you a total of 10x squared. And then we have 4 that we can add with 2. Those are like terms. And that gets you 6. Okay. All right, let's go to the next page. Here, simplifying completely. So what we want to do is take this here and break down the 20. So 20 breaks down to 5 times 4, and 4 breaks down to 2 times 2. I have a pair of 2's. The pairs go outside, and that leftover 5 goes inside. Now let's do our variables. How many times does 2 go into 3, or how many sets of 2 are there in 3? There is basically one set, but there is one left over. How many times does 2 go into 4? Exactly 2 times. All right, these ones have negative exponents here, so you have to flip them. This will go to the bottom, and hop the line, change the sign to positive. This one will go to the top, hop the line, change the sign. I'm going to simplify across the top. X squared times x to the third, you add the exponents. 2 plus 3 is 5, and you still have a y squared. On the bottom, you have a y to the fourth, and then you put these together. Z to the fifth times z to the second is z to the seventh. Again, you're adding the exponents. We're not completely simplified because you have y's on top and y's on the bottom. So you have 2 y's on top and 4 on the bottom, and you cancel them, you're going to have 2 left, and the 2 left are going to be on the bottom. So you have x to the fifth over y squared z to the seventh. There are no y's left on top because they canceled. Right, the next one right here is not multiplying. That has a minus sign, so you're actually going to subtract. So we're going to distribute that negative first. We have x squared minus 3x plus 2 minus 2x squared plus 4x minus 3, distributing the negative. And now we're going to add like terms. X squared and negative 2x squared is a negative x squared. Now we'll add our x's. Negative 3x and positive 4x makes x. And the last one is 2 times this, or 2 minus 3 is negative 1. All right, finding the vertex. The vertex is the very highest or lowest point of your parabola, and that is a coordinate of 1, negative 4. This one is the lowest point. The lowest is a minimum, and the lowest it goes is the y value, which is negative 4. Axial symmetry is an x equals, and x equals 1 here. It's the line that goes down the middle and cuts that parabola in half. What are the zeros? That's where it crosses the x-axis. So it crosses here and here. We're going to write them as coordinates. We have negative 1, 0, and we have positive 3, 0. Okay. Transformations. Transformations is when you say, oh, there's a reflection, there's a vertical stretch or compression, or there's a left and right, up and down shift. This right here is where you do the opposite same to find where the vertex is of this parabola. So opposite of negative 3 is 3, and same is negative 2. How do you plot that point? Because there's no reflection, there's no negative, there's no vertical change because there's no number here. It's just simply plotting this point, which would take you, oh, sorry, not left, which would take you right 3 and down 2. All right, this next one is the same concept, but this time we do have a negative in front there and a 2 in front. So this negative is a reflection in the x-axis. The 2 is a vertical stretch. If it's greater than 1, it's a stretch by a factor of 2. This plus 1, remember, opposite same. So that's negative 1, and this is the same, negative 3. So that would take you left 1, and this minus 3 takes you down 3. Okay. The next one asks you to write a function that has a vertical stretch by a factor of 2 and a reflection over the x-axis. So vertical stretch means the a value is 2, the reflection is the negative in the front. So we're going to take this function right here. Oh, sorry, g of x I meant to say. G of x. And that's going to be the negative because reflection over the x-axis, and then the vertical stretch by 2, and then you have to write your x squared. All right, the next one says change this into standard form. So your first step is to basically multiply out those parentheses, which x plus 1 squared is really x plus 1 times x plus 1. And you still have the minus 4. So we're going to multiply that out. So go ahead and distribute this x. X times x is x squared. X times 1 is x. 1 times x is x. And 1 times 1 is 1. And you still have the minus 4. I'm going to add my like terms inside that parenthesis. So I have my x and x I can put together. So I have x squared plus 2x plus 1. And then the minus 4. Now I'll distribute the 3. So distributing 3 gets me 3x squared plus 6x plus 3. And you still have the minus 4. Last step is to add those like terms together at the end. 3x squared plus 6x minus 1. All right, it says change this to the standard form. It's the same procedure as I just did. So I'm going to go f of x equals negative 3, and I'm going to write this x minus 2 twice, because that's what it means to square something. I have a minus 3. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply this out here. So I'll distribute x times x is x squared, x times negative 2 is negative 2x, negative 2 times x is negative 2x again, negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. You still have the minus 3. So now I'm going to simplify inside this parenthesis. 2x, or negative 2x and negative 2x is negative 4x. And I'm going to go ahead and distribute that negative 3. So I get negative 3x squared plus 12x minus 12. And then don't forget the negative 3 at the end. And the last step is just putting that last two terms together. Negative 12 and negative 3 is negative 15. Okay. Solve the equation by factoring. So that factoring, you should think of a t-chart. 2 things that multiply to get x is x and x. 2 things that multiply to get 8 is 4 and 2. One of these has to be negative. Since I want a positive 2 out of this, I'm going to make this negative. So my factors are x plus 4 times x minus 2. Oh, and I should say you are checking. You want it to be this 2x at the end here. I didn't write that down. But multiplying across this way got you the negative 2x. Multiplied this way is 4x. 4x minus 2x is 2x. Set these equal to 0 because you're solving, right? And you get x equals negative 4 and x equals positive 2. Okay. So next page here. Solve again by factoring. It has to equal 0 before you do that. So I'm going to go ahead and move that 5 over by subtracting it, and now I'll do a t-chart. 2 things that multiply to get 6x squared is 3x and 2x. 2 things that multiply to get 5 is 5 and 1. We want this to have a 7x at the end out of this. So I want to make my 1 negative. 3x times negative 1 is negative 3x. And then 5 times 2x is 10x. And 10 minus 3, that gets you a positive 7. So I have my factors across the top is 3x plus 5. Across the bottom is 2x minus 1. And then we split those up and make them equal 0. All right, here we were going to subtract 5. And then last step here is to divide this 3 here. So one of the answers is negative 5/3. Here we're going to go ahead and add 1 to the other side and then divide by 2. And then that's going to get us x equals 1/2. The next one says solve by completing the square, so that's the plus blank thing. X squared minus 12x plus blank equals 28 plus blank. And then I'm going to take half of the b, which is negative 6, square that, gets you a 36. That's the blank. And then 36 goes into both blanks. Add these together and you get a total of 64. To get rid of the square, you take the square to both sides. Don't forget plus or minus. we have x minus 6 equals plus or minus the square root of 64 is 8. The last step is to move that 6 over to the other side by adding it. Oops, let me write x here. X equals positive 6 because I'm adding it over, plus or minus 8. And remember, this is going to break up into two equations because plus or minus. So 6 plus 8 is one of them, and 6 minus 8, plus or minus. But simplify that. So 14 is one answer, and negative 2 is the other. Okay, factor the polynomial. When you think of factoring, you could do straight the t-chart, or you can do the difference of squares. Two things that multiply to get 25x squared is 5x times 5x. Two things that multiply to get negative 9 is negative 3 and 3. And then this multiplies over here to 15x, multiplied here negative 15x, and that does add it to 0. So you have 5x minus 3 and 5x plus 3. This just says factor, so you don't make it equal 0. And it doesn't matter which order you write these in. Okay, this next one says to deposit $500 in an account that pays interest. How much money in the account after 4 years? So if it pays, it's going up in value. That means that it's going to be a times 1 plus r to the t. We deposited 500, that's your initial. 1 plus the rate, we have to change this to a decimal, which would be 0.05. And then in 4 years would be the 4 in the exponent. And from there, you're going to be plugging it into a calculator. So we have a calculator. And there we go. We're going to plug that in. So we have 500 parenthesis 1 plus 0.05 raised to the 4th power. Yes, you could add that together if you wanted to, but we're just looking for the answer. Remember, it's money, so 2 decimal places. That gets you $607.75. Okay, the next one says that you have a truck that you bought for $22,000. It depreciates. So the word depreciate means it goes down in value at a rate of 10% per year. What's the value of the truck after 4 years? So this time it's an a times 1 minus r because it's going down in value. So 22,000 is what it starts off with. 1 minus change 10% to a decimal is 0.1 raised to the 4th power. And again, you're going to have to put that in a calculator to get that answer. So I'm going to put in 22000 times 1 minus 0.1, and then I'm going to raise that to the 4th power. And that gets you a total of $14,434.20. 20 cents. Okay. Solve the system. So we're going to set this equal to each other. 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. Make that equal x minus 2. I'm going to move it all to one side of the equal sign. So I'm going to basically subtract the x, and I'm going to add the 2. Okay, changing the signs when you move it over. 2x squared minus 4x equals 0, because this cancels, this cancels, this cancels. So factor out a GCF, you can divide 2 into both, and they both have an x. So you're left with an x minus negative 4 divided by 2 is 2. Split these up, make them each equal 0, because remember that this does have an x, you make it equal 0. So you have x equals 0, and we have x equals 2. Add 2 and divide by 2 here. But we're not done yet because we're solving a system, so we need to plug the x back in to find the y. We're plugging into the bottom equation. Y equals 0 minus 2, that gets us negative 2. And so our coordinate is 0, negative 2. Here we're going to plug in the 2 in there. Y equals 2 minus 2. And plugging it into this bottom equation, which gets me 0. So the other coordinate is x, then y. X, then y. Okay, this one asks you to find the quadratic model. So this is you knowing how to plug into the calculator. So just as a, there's a little bit of a glare, maybe over here. Okay, so we're going to hit the stat button, hit enter for calculate. We're going to put in these first set of values into the first column, and then we're going to arrow to the right and put these numbers in the second column. And then to finally get the equation, hit stat, arrow to edit, and then or calculate, sorry. And then we want the quadratic model. So arrow down to calculate, and then we'll have our values for A, B, and C. So I'm just going to write my A, B, and C values here and write the equation in a minute. A, I'll round it off to 2 decimals, 0.76. Our B would round off to 0.81, and our C would round off to 0.45. And I'll write my equation with that. So it's y equals A x squared, then b, x, and then c. Okay. This next one right here is finding if it's linear, quadratic, or exponential. Linear, the first difference is the same. Quadratic, you're looking for the second difference. Exponential is when you're multiplying by the same number. Okay, so here we go. Let's look at this one. So remember, you move this number over first. You start with this number. So 2 and then minus the 10. That gets you negative 8. Here we're going to move the 0 over, oops, 0, and then subtract the number above it, 2, negative 2. We're moving the 4 over, and then subtract the number above it, 0. And then move this 14 over, and then subtract the number above it, and that gets us a 10. Well, those are not the same, so this is definitely not linear. Let's see if it's quadratic. So let's move the over to this side, move the 2 over, I should say negative 2, subtract a negative 8, which is really adding, and negative 2 plus 8 is 6. All right, let's move this next one over. So that's a 4, and we're subtracting the number above it, which is a negative 2. We're really adding. 4 plus 2 is 6. And last one, we're going to move this over, which is 10, and subtract the number above it, and we get 6. Oh, look, the second difference is constant, so this would be considered quadratic, because the second difference is constant. Okay. All right, let's go on to the last page here. This is the same thing as the last one, but we're going to have different numbers. So let's go ahead and make sure we move these numbers over when we do it. So start with negative 6 and then subtract the number above it. That's really adding. And negative 6 plus 11 is 5. So we have negative 1 here. Move it over. Subtract the number above it. That's really adding. And that gets you 5. Let's move this over. Subtract the number above it. That's really adding. That gets you 5. Last one. Move the number over. Subtract the number above it. That gets you 5. I don't even have to do the second difference. The first difference is the same. That means it's linear. And that's because the first difference is constant. All right, the next one asks you for the discriminant. The formula for discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So we needed this to equal 0 before we start. So I'm going to go ahead and move the negative 10x over, or negative 10 over, which makes it a positive 10. And once it equals 0, then I can go ahead and do my A, B, C chart. And x squared, the number in front of that is 1. X, the number in front of that is negative 5, and the constant is 10. Let's plug it in. So b squared, so that's negative 5 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 10. Negative 5 squared is 25, and 4 times 10 is 40. Subtract this, and you get a total of 15. And so 15 is the discriminant. Since that is positive, there will be 2 real solutions. Right, the next one has foiling, but remember that I squared equals negative 1. We'll have to simplify that. So 9 times 3, that's 27. 9 times I is a 9i. Negative 2i times 3 is negative 6i, and negative 2i times I is a negative 2i squared. Okay, 9i and then negative 6i, you can put that together to be a 3i. But keep in mind that's negative 2, and I squared, this I squared right here, is equal to negative 1. So you're going to actually multiply that together. So that ends up being a positive 2, and 27 plus 2 is 29. And remember, you want to write the answer as real then imaginary. Right, the next one, get the square root methods, PEMDAS backwards. So I'm going to subtract the 169 to the other side, which makes it negative. Next step, I'll divide by 36. So you have x squared equals negative 169 over 36. And then you want to take the square root of both sides to get rid of the square, plus or minus. So you have plus or minus. The square root of 169 is 13. The square root of 36 is 6. And don't forget the negative inside there is an I. Okay, using the quadratic formula, let's do our A, B, C chart. And A is 1, because this is already equal to 0. B is 8, C is 9. So you have x equals negative b, so it'll be the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root, b squared, minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. All right, start inside the radical. So that's 64, and then 4 times 9 is 36, and 2 times 1 is 2. All right, let's subtract this. So 64 minus 36 is, oops, 64 minus 36, 28. Let's break down the 28. That's 7 and 4, and 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. So you have a pair of 2's and a leftover 7. So that's going to get you -8 plus or minus. The pair goes outside, and then 7 left inside, all over 2. But you can reduce all the outside numbers by 2. Divide by 2 for each of these, and then that gets you -4 plus or minus √7. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this one right here. So we have solve it any way we want. Now, factoring is actually not going to work. So you can use a quadratic formula, or you can complete the square. I'll go ahead and complete the square since the last one that we just did, last one was using the quadratic formula. This is using the plus blank. If I move the 18 over, it's going to be negative. All right, you want to do half of -4, that's -2, and then -2 squared is 4. Adding these together gets you -12. To get rid of the square, you take the square root of both sides, plus or minus. You have the square and square root cancel, and 12 breaks down to 4 and 3, 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. So you have a pair of 2's that goes outside and a 3 left over inside. So the 2 goes outside, the leftover 3 goes inside, but remember there's a negative there, so there's an I. You could put the I in here or in the end. Last step is to add the 2 over to the other side, and you should write it in front of the plus or minus. Okay. This next one right here, we want to get the breakdown of this. 5 times 10, 10 breaks down to 5 times 2. I have a pair of 5, so that's going to go outside. I have a 2 that goes inside, and that negative becomes an I. Write the equation of a circle. We have this right here. You write x opposite, y opposite equals the r squared. So we're going to have to square this number to write it here. So here, opposite of +1 is -1, opposite of -3 is +3, and 3 squared is 9. Okay, we do that again here, the same thing. So we have x something squared, y something squared equals r squared. So we'll square this to get that last number. Opposite of -2 is +2, opposite of +1 is -1. 4 squared is 16. Okay. This next one right here is finding the vertex and the direction it faces. So vertex, you go opposite, opposite here, because they're both in parentheses. You just have to be careful which one's the x and which one's y. Since x is over here, opposite of -1 is +1, opposite of +2 is -2. So that's the vertex. And then we have to find out where it opens. Since y is first, that means that it's going to open left or right. And since this is negative, it's opening to the left. Okay. All right, and the last one right here, again, opposite, opposite. And notice that we do x, then y. So opposite of -1 is +1, opposite of +2 is -2. That's the vertex. And this one is starting with an x, so that means it's going to go up or down. Since 4 is positive, that means it's going to go up. All right, and that's it for this one.